Chapter 30. Breach. Dawn broke on the 7th day of the relentless siege, and as the first rays of sunlight touched the ravaged fields, before Cairo's walls, the armies of Egypt, Atlantis, and Dogon re-examined their positions. Smoke from the previous night's battle had finally thinned, revealing a stark tableau of fallen soldiers arranged in neat rows. Heavily armed troops were separated from their Neanderthal attackers. An atmosphere of silent mourning and grim resolve hung over the scene. Within the large makeshift barracks near the front lines, Ares stood around a map-laden table with Atheros, General Tukan, the leader of the Egyptian military and direct advisor to Seti-Khamun, and various other officers in command of the defensive outposts encircling the city. The tent smelt of sweat, ash, and old leather, each occupant drawn taut with worry as they exchanged reports and updates. "Before we begin," General Tukan announced in a steady voice, "I'd like to formally appoint you to command our strategic efforts, Ares." The others nodded, some in visible relief, recognizing his tactical insight was vital. With a deliberate breath, Ares leant over the table. "What about the rest of the Assembly of Eternal Nations? Have they received our pleas for aid?" he asked, directing his gaze toward Tukan. Tukan tapped a parchment. Its ink-smudged surface was an emblem of late-night urgency. "We have word from every BL member. Suma conveys regrets for the delay. They're currently leaderless. Their Nin has travelled north. Still, they assure us a fleet is on its way." Ares let out a quiet breath, relieved by the promise of reinforcements. Just then 2 figures entered the tent, both in distinctive robes. Their calm bearing marked them as members of the Egyptian Brotherhood of the Serpent. "Good day, brother, sister," Ares greeted them with a polite dip of his head. "Good day, Ares," said the woman, extending her hand in a sign of peace. "I am Nemti. This is Montu. We bring a message from Eden." A ripple of interest moved through the assembled officers. Ares' focus sharpened. "From Eden," he echoed. Nemti nodded once. "The elders hope this conflict ends swiftly and with minimal harm to both your people and the Neanderthals," she explained, her tone thoughtful. "They have also learned from Amazonia that an artifact discovered some time ago was delivered to Atlantis. Once this siege is over, the elders request that you, along with the artifact, come to Eden. They wish for you to study it, to unlock any hidden clues within." For a moment, Ares said nothing. He thought about the artifact stowed with Captain Theron. "I was pursued by assassins from the Brotherhood," he said at length. "If that's so, how can I be sure who to trust now?" Montu stepped forward. His voice was calm, yet resolute. "We're aware of those assassins. Their origins trace back to a rogue group that disbanded a decade ago. To our knowledge, those 2 were the last of that lineage." He offered a small, reassuring smile. "The elders suspected as much. That's why we've come in person." The tension in Ares' posture slackened slightly. "Good. One less worry. But for now, I can't leave. My focus must remain on liberating Cairo." Nemti inclined her head. "Of course, once the city is free, we look forward to your journey to Eden. In the meantime, we've been sent to help." "Your help is welcome," Ares affirmed. "There are 60 Brotherhood fighters scattered along our perimeter. Speak with them, learn what they need, and support them however you can." With that, the pair bowed and departed. Ares turned back to the table just as Atheros spoke, his voice charged with emotion. "We should attack the city before more innocents die," Atheros declared, sounding both grave and driven. A general standing nearby retorted, "If we storm the walls, they'll execute their hostages right away, including Pharaoh Seti-Khamun." Ares' heart panged at the thought. He recalled that his own father, too, is most likely inside. "I can't risk his life, or anyone else's," he said softly, picturing the countless captives trapped within. Another general pressed forward. "We've considered the possibilities. Each day we wait, more are killed, and the enemy gains ground. They could get reinforcements. Another city might fall to their infiltration. We must strike decisively, for the greater good. This blockade alone won't fix things. Ares acknowledged the truth in those words. He exhaled. Yes, he agreed quietly as he leant over the map. We have to assault the pyramid and the city at once. If we free the pyramid from their hold, the negative frequency will stop decimating our morale. I propose a two-pronged attack. At sundown, under the cover of night, we dispatch 1,000 troops to the western gate. A general arched an eyebrow. That gate is narrow. No more than 5 soldiers can pass at once, she stated. Ares inclined his head. True, it leads directly into the central square. If we capture the palace, we can fortify it and give shelter to any rescued civilians. As long as the pyramid remains compromised, our forces are endangered. Atheros straightened. Then I'll lead a battalion of Atlanteans to retake the pyramid. I'll need Egyptian engineers and additional squads to help restore its frequency quickly. General Toucan assented. We're depending on you, Atheros. Free the pyramid, strengthen our troops. A second officer turned to Ares. Their concern was evident. And the gate? We can't just batter it down. Ares traced a route on the map with his finger. I'll form a small team to skirt the coastline, scale the city's outer wall where it meets the sea, and breach it from within. Once the gates open, our main force can flood in. Atheros nodded. Clearly he was impressed. Dangerous, but clever. We'll coordinate so both strikes hit at the same time. A hush descended in the tent as everyone imagined the daunting mission that lay ahead. Outside, shadows lengthened across the trampled fields and fortifications. A quiet resolve settled over Ares as he glanced from face to face, each set in grim determination. The time had come for action. A soft breeze skimmed the Mediterranean waters, while Ares stood in a small, discreetly moored boat. Overhead, dusk tinted the sky a rich violet, and the siege lines shimmered faintly on the dark shore. Drawing a lungful of salt-tinged air, Ares steadied himself. 10 silent figures surrounded him, skilled warriors of the Egyptian Brotherhood, draped in muted cloaks. Among them were Nempti and Montu, fully committed to the plan. They all understood the stakes. Their mission was simple, yet dire. Slip along the coast, scale Cairo's western wall by stealth, and unbar the gate from the inside. Once open, the armies waiting beyond would surge in and begin liberation in earnest. Ares crouched at the prow, making a final check on his equipment. Rope, grappling hooks, and a short blade at his hip. The boat's gentle rocking underpinned the silence. Nempti and Montu exchanged resolute glances with the rest of the party. Each soldier was calm, determined, and keenly aware that any slip could doom them all. Ahead, faint lantern-light glimmered atop Cairo's walls. The altered pyramid frequency still pulsed faintly, casting a subtle, draining tension across the night. They had trained to act despite it, and they would see this mission through. Signalling the rowers, Ares watched the oars dip into the cool water. They advanced with practiced silence, inching closer to the formidable stone wall. Soon the boat glided beneath an overhang of weathered limestone, concealed by the distant crash of waves. Ares motioned Nempti and Montu to ready their grappling lines, while the others held weapons close and prepared to scramble up once the hooks found secure purchase. Nempti was first. She swung her grappling hook in an arc before releasing it. A faint clink on the rocks above signaled a solid hold. Montu followed suit. Ares tested the ropes. They were stable enough. One by one, each member climbed. Their boots scuffed softly on slick stone, and their hearts pounded with the knowledge of what a single slip might bring. The ascent was thankfully shorter than expected. With the faint starlight and Ares' memorized map as guides, they hauled themselves onto a slim walkway near the top. Kneeling in a quiet line, they caught their breaths as they gazed over the city below. All 10 had made it. All that remained now was to open the gate so thousands of soldiers could pour inside and retake Cairo. Beneath a thin veil of moonlit cloud, Atheros waited at the pyramid's base. its limestone surface corrupted by the sinister resonance that still gnawed at the defenders' spirits. He glanced upward. Once the pyramid was a symbol of unity. Tonight it loomed as both fortress and battleground. The pyramid's negative frequency was taking its effect on the soldiers. They weren't in best form, and Atheros knew this. 400 men from Egypt, Atlantis, and Dogon gathered behind him, armoured and grim. The door to the pyramid rose before them. It was heavy and imposing. In that single structure lay a crucial step toward freeing Cairo from its torment. Clustered around Atheros were 8 Brotherhood members he had never encountered before. He sensed their discipline and skill in the way they carried themselves, each one a blade waiting to be drawn. Though their faces were partially hidden by hoods, their calm demeanour spoke volumes. One of them glanced at Atheros, awaiting direction, while the others adjusted straps, checked weapons, and whispered in low tones. Briefly, he wondered about their journeys, their oaths, and what had led them here, shoulder to shoulder, beside him in this silent vigil. "Wait for the signal," Atheros said in a firm tone. "When the gates open, when Ares completes his part, we breach." He looked toward a distant cluster of torches and encampments where he knew Ares would be making his move. Their plan depended on timing. If Ares and his team opened the western gate, they would have their distraction. Then, and only then, would Atheros' force strike into the pyramid's narrow passage, risking blood and life to wrest control from the Neanderthals. The soldiers steeled themselves. They fastened their helmets and shields. Some prayed softly, others stood in disciplined silence. The Brotherhood members exchanged nods, confirming their readiness. Atheros drew a final breath of cool air, tasting the tension like metal on his tongue. They would wait, like coiled springs, until Ares' Achior signal, and then the true battle for Cairo's heart would commence. Across the moonlit plain, a tense silence fell over the soldiers gathered at the western edge of Cairo's fortified perimeter. 2,000 men and women stood shoulder to shoulder. Their armour and weapons reflected the faint glow of the stars. Interspersed among them were the remaining Brotherhood members and the experienced Egyptian officers who had orchestrated each step of this elaborate plan. Commands passed in whispers and hand signals. No voice would betray their presence. All eyes were fixed on the western gate's looming outline. Rarely used for large-scale movement, it was narrow and easily defended, yet it stood as the key to the city's salvation. The plan hinged on Ares and his small team. At an unknown hour, cloaked by night and stealth, he would enter the city to wrest the lock from inside. Only then could the waiting army surge forward, flooding into Cairo to liberate their people and drive out the invading Neanderthals. Impatience tugged at the soldiers' nerves. They had endured a week of siege, watched allies perish, and fought under the pyramid's draining frequency. The Brotherhood members stood calm and resolute, blending unshakable poise with lethal readiness. The Egyptians, weary yet unbowed, gripped their spears and swords, poised to charge. Behind them, the fields bore the marks of prior battles, charred wooden spikes, splintered barricades, and the lingering smell of smoke. The fate of the city lay ahead, behind a stubborn gate. For now, they could only hold their breath, their eyes locked on the dark barrier, straining to see even the smallest sign that Ares had reached his goal. Beneath the cold, unyielding stone walls of the Grand Hall, Polaris stood among hundreds of captives, their faces etched with dread and hopelessness. Once a place for gatherings and celebration, the hall now echoed with the murmurs of the imprisoned. Torches flickered, sending wavering shadows across the stone floor, and intensifying the heavy aura that pressed down on them all. Each day their grim routine was broken by a horrifying ritual inflicted by Neanderthal captors. Polaris had witnessed it countless times, each horror carving deeper lines of anger and sorrow into his exhausted features. Without warning, a guard would enter, commanding instant silence. The air thickened with dread as anxious eyes shifted toward him. Everyone braced for the inevitable choice. Today was no different. The guard, a hulking figure with scars lining his face, scanned the chamber with chilling efficiency. His gaze settled on a young man crouched in a corner. Terror was bright in his wide eyes. With one swift motion, he seized the trembling captive by the arm, hauling him to his feet. The man's cries of anguish died beneath the guard's steely stare. A numb horror coursed through Polaris. The guard dragged his chosen victim to the hall's centre, where Brugar, Vargan's formidable, saber-toothed companion, waited. Its amber eyes gleamed in the torchlight. Powerful muscles tensed under its sleek fur. The silence that swept the room was suffocating, each captive's breath held in agonized suspense. At the guard's harsh shove, Brugar leapt without hesitation. The onlookers flinched as the beast's massive fangs tore into the captive's flesh. The square echoed with the wet snap of sinew and bone. Blood splattered across the stones, the captive's final screams fading into the Neanderthal's chilling detachment. They stood back. Their faces were void of pity, studying the macabre display as if it were a routine chore. Polaris's fists tightened at his sides. Rage clashed with helplessness. He had learnt to stifle any urge to retaliate. Any sign of defiance would rain harsher consequences on everyone. Yet each day of witnessing such cruelty eroded his composure, forcing him to face the merciless reality closing in on them. A short distance away, the woman Polaris had previously comforted sank to the floor, hugging her knees tight, tears trailing down her cheeks. Her eyes found Polaris, pleading for solace he felt powerless to give. Wordlessly, he stepped to her side, resting a reassuring hand on her quivering shoulder. "You're not alone," he whispered. His voice was hardly carrying over the distant howls of despair. "We'll find a way out." She looked up, her gaze flickered with a fragile hope. "Canis, he's still out there," she breathed. Her grip tightened on a small pendant, a token of the husband she had lost. Polaris nodded. Thoughts of Ursa fueled his determination. "I promise I won't stop searching. We must stay strong for ourselves and for the ones we cherish." When Brugar finally finished feeding, the hall returned to a stifled quiet, broken only by muffled sobs and hushed prayers. Polaris inhaled, steadying himself against the torrent of despair that threatened to engulf him. He glanced around, meeting the anguished eyes of those who shared this grim plight. Amid the cruelty and heartbreak, he made a silent vow. He would draw on whatever unity these captives could muster, shaping their collective will to defend, to protect, and ultimately to free Cairo from the Neanderthal clutches. For Ursa, for Katniss, and for each innocent soul held captive, Polaris resolved to battle on, refusing to let this darkness extinguish the faint light of hope that still shimmered in their midst. Hidden by the veil of night, Ares and 10 Brotherhood fighters navigated Cairo's back streets with practiced stealth. The city's once lively alleys had dimmed to hollow echoes, the oppressive pyramid frequency sapping morale yet heightening their urgency. Each step guided them nearer to their objective, the Western Gate, the crucial path to freeing the city and its captives. Nemti fell in step with Ares. "We stand with you, Ares. The Brotherhood has survived worse trials, and greater still lie ahead. Let's reclaim Cairo," she declared in a resolute tone. A trio of Neanderthal patrols rounded a corner, their hulking outlines barely visible in the gloom. Instantly, Ares and his companions melded into the shadows. Their hearts pounded as the patrol wandered closer. With a swift gesture, Ares signaled for silent readiness, his eyes locked onto the unsuspecting foe. "Stay undetected until the gates are ours," he whispered, his voice barely audible above Cairo's distant turmoil. Unaware of the threat at hand, the Neanderthal patrol lumbered by. Ares struck swiftly, unleashing 2 blades in lethal arcs. He slayed the first guard and then dispatched the next pair quickly with fluid strokes. With the bodies concealed in a dark alley, the way to the gate lay open. Leading them onward, Ares felt the crushing weight of responsibility. The gate, heavily guarded by 15 Neanderthals, bristled with watchful eyes. At his command, his fighters fanned out along the perimeter. Every movement was calculated and precise. Moving in near-perfect unison, the Brotherhood ambushed the unsuspecting sentries. Steel met stone in a fierce melee. The enclosed courtyard magnified every roar, every metallic crash, and every laboured breath. Wading through the throng of combatants, Ares pressed toward the gate's mechanism. He deftly parried a spear and countered with a decisive strike to fell the warrior blocking him. Finally, he reached the gate's lever. Straining with every muscle, he forced the heavy stone door open. Its ancient hinges groaned as the blockade gave way. A sharp cry cut through the fray at that moment. Nempty crumpled under a Neanderthal's brutal blow, her body lifeless against the blood-slick floor. Ares' breath caught, grief clawed at his chest as he met her fading gaze in a shared instant of sorrow. Fury and conviction melded in him. He roared, "For Cairo!" The thousands of concealed soldiers, who had been poised for this moment, surged past the open gate. In a sweeping rush they overwhelmed the last pockets of enemy resistance. The ground shuddered with the thunder of boots. The once impenetrable gate now stood as a hallway of liberation. The human armies poured into the city's heart. Beneath a luminous moon, Cairo shimmered with sporadic torchlight and erupting combat. Steel clashed, war cries rang, and street by street, the city began to reclaim itself. At the forefront, Ares led his fighters with resolute bravery, slicing through Neanderthal ranks and clearing a path for the troops who followed. The city's future hung in the balance, and as the forces pressed on, they were determined to deliver it from the grip of this merciless foe. At the same late hour, the Giza plateau stood cloaked in darkness. Stars glimmered like distant sentinels, while Atheros and his battalion gathered at the pyramid's base. Their armour caught the glow of nearby torches. Tension saturated the air. Every sense was on high alert. Then the night exploded with battle. The hiss of flaming arrows, the jarring roar of firebombs, the unrelenting chorus of clashing steel echoed for miles. The sky momentarily blazed with the fiery assault, casting dancing shadows across stone remnants older than memory. Atheros' eyes narrowed, his grip tightening on his spear. The time had come. He drew a deep breath as he steadied his nerves and raised his voice above the tumult. "Now!" he shouted, his command sliced through the night air like a blade. A squadron of Brotherhood fighters moved with lethal precision. They ignited a rig of explosives at the base of the pyramid's sealed door, their actions synchronized and swift. The charge detonated in a brilliant flash of light and force, sending shockwaves through the ground. The stone barrier groaned under immense pressure, succumbing to the blast and crashing down with disconcerting ease. Without pausing for the smoke to clear, Atlantean and Egyptian battalions surged forward. Silhouettes blended into the shadows as they charged into the breached entrance. The narrow passageway loomed ahead, a confined choke point now brimming with the promise of deadly conflict. Within, the Neanderthal defenders were already poised for battle. Their brute strength and fierce temperament made them daunting adversaries. Atheros and his allies drove their spears through the dense smoke, each thrust a desperate bid to break through the Neanderthals' defences. The chaos inside the pyramid was immediate and unforgiving. Soldiers found themselves disoriented, movements were hindered by thick haze and a brutal enemy onslaught. Dozens of soldiers perished in the opening breach, their still forms silent proof of the Neanderthals' ferocious defence. The Neanderthals fought back with unwavering tenacity, forcing Atheros and his battalion to yield ground under sheer, unrelenting aggression. The pyramid's confined corridors magnified every clang of steel. Every death cry echoed like a tolling bell through the ancient stones. As the battle raged on, Atheros faced a stark truth. Nearly 50 of his infantry had fallen, their sacrifice a fresh weight on his conscience. He glanced around, watching fatigued and wounded soldiers struggling to sustain their positions against the Neanderthals' unending offensive. The bold confidence of their initial strike now waned, starkly revealing the true cost of this campaign. With a heavy heart and anger roiling within, Atheros realized they could not maintain their assault. "Retreat!" he bellowed. His shout resonated above the din of combat. "Fall back and regroup!" The battalion pulled out, moving with desperation and haste. They fought their way from the pyramid's constricted passageways, each step a conflict against the overwhelming power of their foe. At the exit, smoke, debris, and desperate men surged into the night. Without retaking the pyramid, every soldier in the city remains at a disadvantage. "We must restore the proper frequency," Atheros repeated urgently. In the city, the pyramid's altered frequency still menaced Ares' forces, weakening morale and leaving them vulnerable to the Neanderthals' relentless fury. Ares scanned the ravaged battlefield. Dozens of his soldiers lay fallen, a grim testament to the push for victory. Though the mission's toll weighed on him, Ares recognized the fight was far from done. Ares marshaled his remaining warriors, their resolve stiffened by the brutal events of the night. Though battered and bruised, they knew their role remained vital. Cairo's fate and the lives of countless captives depended on nullifying the pyramid's negative resonance and wresting the city from the Neanderthals' grip. Steeling himself, Ares readied his troops for the next stage of the assault, bracing for the true test of their mettle that lay ahead. He glanced back at the distant skyline of Cairo. His heart sank at the dread he felt, yet he refused to let it deter him. Under the cloak of night, Ares' fighters surged through Cairo's winding streets, their footsteps tapped on the worn cobblestones. Once a beacon of civilization, the city now resounded with chaos and destruction. Ominous shadows flickered across the walls as Neanderthal warriors unleashed sudden strikes, seemingly unaffected by the pyramid's draining frequency. Their uncanny agility and raw ferocity overwhelmed Ares' men at every turn. From the rooftops, Neanderthals descended like dark phantoms, their eyes alight with savage intent. They emerged from narrow gaps and hidden doorways, each wielded weapons with lethal precision. Ares' stomach twisted as he watched his soldiers succumb. Despite their training and numbers, they were hard-pressed to counter the Neanderthals' brutal strength. Each Neanderthal claimed the lives of 3 or 4 humans before being taken down by coordinated strikers. A cold dread knotted Ares' insides as casualties piled up around him. This once mighty army showed signs of buckling beneath the unceasing offensive. Still, amid the swirling terror and loss, their numeric advantage remained. Refusing to crumble, Ares found fresh resolve and urged his remaining fighters onward. "Keep moving! Don't let them break our line," he shouted, his voice cutting across the uproar. The Brotherhood warriors, stoic and fierce, fought shoulder to shoulder with the Egyptians. Their unity forged a spark of hope in the night's gloom. Against every obstacle, Ares and his troops pressed deeper, aiming for Cairo's heart, its grand palace, symbol of courage and final refuge. Each advancement came with fierce contest, the Neanderthals ferociously defending every alley and courtyard. Yet the combined might of Atlantean, Egyptian, and Brotherhood soldiers began to shift the balance. Reaching the palace courtyard, they were met by a torrent of Neanderthals, determined to hold what they saw as theirs. The courtyard evolved into a maelstrom of violence. Swords crashed, spears thrust, and desperate warriors locked in a deadly dance. Ares guided his troops with unwavering purpose, slicing through the foe. "We need that pyramid frequency changed," one Brotherhood fighter bellowed, his shout ragged from exertion and dread. Ares' fierce and reassuring shouts in reply. "Atheros and his men fight as we do," he replied. "Hold on until they restore the frequency." The battlefield itself throbbed with tension. Both armies were vying for every inch of ground. Towers of flame cast demonic silhouettes over battered streets, turning the city into an almost surreal battleground. Still Ares pressed onward, forging a path for those who followed. He was determined that Cairo would be freed from its invaders. Within the palace walls, the Neanderthals began a horrifying spree of bloodshed, cutting down every human captive they could reach within the temple. The air thickened with the stench of blood and the agonized screams of the dying. Each life ended without mercy. In the Giza Plateau's darkness, the once proud pyramids, repositories of ancient wisdom, were now fields of conflict, absorbing blow after blow. Atheros stood at the Great Pyramid's base, scanning the unfolding disaster. Smoke churned into the sky, saturated with the nauseating scent of burning timbers and flesh. The clamour of war, clashing swords, guttural cries and despairing scream formed a relentless cacophony. Returning his focus to the group of soldiers and the pyramid's sealed entrance, Atheros felt both urgency and desperation warping each heartbeat. The frequency that once anchored the city had become its undoing, draining the morale of his men and lending an edge to the enemy. Time was his foe. Each passing moment allowed the Neanderthals to further entrench their dominion. "We must keep pushing, end this frequency," Atheros roared, his directive cut through the uproar. "Stand with me, and we take back this city. Every soul inside Cairo is counting on us." Summoning all his resolve, Atheros led another charge, refusing to watch his soldiers bleed out. Flanked by spearmen, he drove into the very centre of the chaos, dispatching Neanderthal warriors with a relentless precision born of pure necessity. Farther within the pyramid, the interior had fallen silent, a grim sign that the Neanderthals had ended the lives of those previously responsible for upholding Cairo's harmonious frequency. Inside the darkness, Atheros and his battalion pressed further. Tight passages prevented them from moving freely, yet they continued undeterred, clashing with Neanderthals, whose raw strength proved formidable. Despite spears twice breaking through his armour, Atheros pressed on. Blood mingled with dust and sweat on his face as he forced his way toward the pyramid's resonance chamber. The Neanderthals capitalized on the pyramid's skewed resonance, striking with savage, unyielding force. Each hulking warrior continued to lay waste to multiple defenders before disciplined formations managed a final blow. Ares witnessed friend after friend cut down. The palace courtyard glistened with fresh blood. The harsh reek of death and sweat poisoned the air. Yet for all the harrowing losses, the defenders possessed one last advantage. The fury of the Neanderthals was formidable, but not infinite. Gathering grit from the depths of their resolve, they pressed on, determined to recapture Cairo. The battlefield was a storm of violence. Flaming arrows arced into the air, igniting makeshift barricades. Swords clashed against the brute force of Neanderthal blades, and the night rang with screams and the clang of steel. Amid the firelight and mayhem, Ares glimpsed movement from the corner of his eye. A squadron of Neanderthal warriors were surging toward the palace's entrance, evidently determined to slaughter the prisoners inside. His heart pounded. His perception was skewed by the frequency. Taking a solitary breath, Ares conjured the tranquil experience of walkabout and the connection to nature instilled within him. Feeling his breath move through his lungs, he centered himself to the air around him, dismissing the Neanderthal manipulation and redirecting himself back to the battle surging around him. A Brotherhood member fought their way to him. "We need that pyramid frequency changed. It's killing us all," he shouted over the din. Ares, bruised and exhausted, caught the words and called back. "Atheros and his battalion face the same fight we do. Hold them off until they can change the frequency." His gaze swept the courtyard, searching for any sign the battle might turn in their favour. In the pyramid's resonance chamber, Atheros' forces protected the engineers, who raced to the controls, their hands steady in the chaos. "We did it! Now change the frequency," Atheros shouted. Slowly, the pyramid's oppressive resonance dissipated, replaced by a restored harmony of 432 Hz. The destructive energy reversed, sweeping out into the city like a vital lifeline. Though badly wounded, Atheros watched the final adjustments. At last, with the frequency stabilized, his men led him back out of the pyramid. Each step away from the chamber carried the weight of their accomplishment and the sorrow of their failure to save the hostages. As he emerged, he caught sight of the captives' bodies scattered across the stone floors. Atheros paused, echoes of the battle reverberated in his ears, painfully aware that, although the immediate threat had been stifled, Cairo's scars and his own would remain for a long time to come. A wave of dread crashed over him. Nothing could alter the tragic reality of those he could not spare. Outside, with the frequency restored, the pyramid's melodic energy cocooned Cairo in a gentle, sustaining embrace. The force that had undermined the defenders now rallied them, bringing a degree of solace back to the war-ravaged city. A radiant warmth pulsed through Ares, clearing the oppressive gloom that had haunted the battlefield. At last, the city's defenders were free from the negative energies that sapped their strength. "The frequency is altered," Ares shouted. His voice rang across the tormented fields. "For Cairo!" The soldiers joined his rallying cry. New resolve surged through the ranks, and Ares led a resolute garrison of infantry down the ravaged streets, scanning every dark corner for lingering pockets of Neanderthal resistance. His goal was in reach, the city's core, where prisoners still waited in peril. Their path led them to the grand mess hall. Ares braced himself as he pushed open the heavy doors, only to be met by a chilling sight. In the flickering torchlight, he recognized his father, Polaris, standing amid a crowd of captives. Further in, beyond swirling shadows, Neanderthal guards slaughtered hostages. "Father!" Ares shouted. His voice was raw with dread. It cut through the chaos of shrieks and clanging steel. In shock, Polaris's eyes locked onto Ares, reflecting sorrow and disbelief. Between them was a line of hostile warriors and the silent bodies of those already slaughtered. Spurred by desperation, Ares pushed forward, determined to reach his father. Neanderthal guards blocked his path. Their snarling figures appeared as a daunting wall. Ares fought with fierce precision, parrying, cutting, and stepping deeper through the mob. Each blow risked his life. With every strike he advanced a step closer. Then a monstrous Neanderthal appeared from the shadows, his weapon glinting with malevolence. Without warning he lunged, plunging a cruel blade into Polaris's side and sending him sprawling to the ground, mere meters from Ares. "No!" Ares' anguished cry tore from his throat as he watched his father collapse, blood spreading across the cold floor. Shocked into rage, Ares hurled himself at the brute. Their swords met in a vicious clash. Ares fought with every ounce of skill he possessed, weaving and striking with lethal grace. At last, with a decisive swing, he beheaded the Neanderthal, a violent end driven by utter resolve and fury. Breathing hard and slick with blood, Ares dropped to his knees beside Polaris, who lay gasping for breath. This man, once the bedrock of Ares' world, was now slipping away, and the sight wrenched at his heart. Polaris' eyes fluttered as he tried to focus. A final faint smile crossed his lips. "You have done well, son," he whispered. Ignoring his own weariness, Ares' trembling hands ghosted over Polaris' bloody wound. Tears welled up, threatening to choke him, as memory and reality collided. He had arrived too late. "Father, I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice hollow. "I could not save you." Weak yet filled with the lingering warmth of paternal devotion, Polaris's gaze found Ares. He murmured, "Ares, you've become so strong, so grown." Ares' tears finally spilled over. "Mother, how can I tell her what's happened? How can I tell her I failed to protect you?" A final soft breath rattled in Polaris's chest. "Let her know I love her," he sighed. His voice was waning but resolute. Ares' anguish ravaged his features as he bowed closer. "I've missed you, father." In his last moments, Polaris's love remained. His feeble grip tightened, though barely, around Ares' hand. "You are doing what you love to Batig," he murmured. "I have missed you too, my son. It would be wrong to hold you back. Are you truly happy? Ares wept, burying his face in the brief comfort of Polaris's presence. I'm trying, he managed. That's all a father needs, Polaris whispered. His eyes fluttered shut, and with that, the final spark of his life faded, leaving Ares alone in the echoing stillness. Time compressed around Ares, the ruined hall, spinning in sorrow. He drew a trembling breath, silently pledging to continue. Rising unsteadily, he gazed at the dawn's first rays illuminating the battered city. Gathering what was left of his strength and his father's memory, Ares turned to his soldiers. Clashes rose anew as the battle resumed. Ares understood that though the pyramid's frequency had changed, their final victory lay deeper in the palace. His father's death burnt behind him. Strengthening his grip on his sword, he pressed forward, resolved to purge Cairo of its invaders, to honour his father's memory, and to fulfill the promise of deliverance they had fought so hard to achieve. The roar of combat faded to low moans and ragged breathing. The grand mess hall stood quiet now, its stone floor littered with the evidence of savage conflict. Ares' men methodically checked for survivors, forcing out the last Neanderthals who dared remain. On every side lay bodies, friend and foe, an unflinching testament to war's cruelty. Every corner of the hall was stained with the night's tragedy, dead captives and ravaged walls scorched by flames. Yet among the rubble, a spark of defiance glimmered. Ares staggered from pain and fatigue. He slowly made his way through the hall. Grief bore down on him, each step heavier than the last. Reaching the back of the room, he saw again Polaris's motionless form beside the rescued captives, an image that seized his heart anew. Summoning all his will, Ares turned to his men. Let's finish what we came here to do. Despite the tears that threatened, his voice held steady. We can still save Cairo, end this horror once and for all. Leading them back into Cairo's ravaged streets, he vowed that Polaris's sacrifice, and the sacrifices of so many others, would not be in vain. The remaining Neanderthal forces had barricaded themselves within the central palace. Outnumbered, they concentrated on spreading as much brutality as possible before their inevitable demise. Archers lined the streets, loosing arrows at Neanderthals yet to retreat. Pressed by the barrage, the Neanderthals retreated inside the temple. Outside, the remaining human forces surrounded every escape route. Bloodied and exhausted Ares led the charge across the palace's forecourt. His soldiers pressed in around him. The great palace doors were sealed. Battering at them accomplished little. Glancing at the ornate mosaic glass windows flanking the main hall, Ares shouted, "Go through the windows!" With a crash of glass, soldiers burst into the palace from both sides, opening the doors and granting their comrades entry to seek revenge. Chaos ensued as Neanderthals, caught unprepared, found themselves slashed and overrun by the advancing army. Gritting his teeth, Ares forced his way forward, his sword seeking the captors he blamed for his father's death. Suddenly a booming voice echoed from the rear of the hall. At the top of the sweeping staircase stood Vargan, flanked by a dozen of his fiercest warriors and his saber-toothed companion. "Stop!" he roared. His voice swallowed the hall in silence. In one brutal motion, Vargan dragged forward Pharaoh Setikamun, holding a blade to his throat. Instantly, the Egyptian soldiers froze. Their loyalty to the pharaoh outweighed their desire to strike. "You will grant us safe passage out of this city," Vargan spat, "or else your precious pharaoh dies." The fighters, panting and still on edge, looked to Ares for an answer. "That isn't an option," Ares barked in reply. "Then more blood will spill," Vargan snapped, flashing a predatory grin. Scanning the hall, Ares saw how thoroughly they had cornered the Neanderthal stragglers. He was equally desperate to prevent further loss of life. Escaping would only allow these killers to bring further havoc elsewhere. He took a breath, then raised his voice again. "If you want your freedom, face me alone. You've no more than 30 warriors left. We are thousands. If you defeat me in single combat, I'll let you walk back to Pannonia." His words reverberated through the temple hall. Vargan eyed Ares' wounds, reasoning that this battered opponent was an easy kill. "Very well, human," he grunted. He shoved the pharaoh into a guard's grip and strode forward. Ares dropped his ragged holster and ruined sheath to the ground, quickly murmuring a command to the soldiers nearest him. "Once the fight begins, unleash everything." As Vargan descended toward him with his weapons at the ready, Ares braced, aware of how precarious the moment was. Neanderthal and human alike stood back. The sudden silence was more chilling than the din of fighting. "You murdered my father," Ares said. "You will die for this." Vargan smirked. "Another life crushed beneath the great wheel. It finds all of us eventually." With a feral snarl, Vargan lunged. A sharp cry rang out. "For Cairo!" echoed off the marble walls. In an instant, a storm of arrows struck Vargan, tearing through every vital part of his body. He collapsed to the floor in a heap of blood and shattered pride. Ares stood over him, breathing hard. "You've no honor," he grunted to Ares. "And you died for nothing." Ares scoffed in rarebit. A second volley followed, this time aimed at the Neanderthals on the stairs. At once, Pharaoh Seti-Khamun tried to scramble free, only to be blindsided by Brugar, the monstrous saber-tooth, who tackled him down the steps. The beast's fangs tore into the pharaoh, ripping him open in a savage exhibition. Ares and the soldiers rushed to intervene. They clashed with the last pockets of Neanderthal resistance. Brugar managed to maim one more fighter, however the ferocious cat was soon overpowered, its body cut and pinned beneath a hail of weapons and arrows. The pharaoh lay mutilated, motionless at the bottom of the steps. Ares felt an agitating mix of fury and failure. There was no time to grieve. More soldiers sprinted up the staircase, purging any Neanderthal who still lingered in the palace. Cairo's palace and mess halls, once the heart of a proud city, had become a battlefield of terror and regret. At last, the Neanderthals were falling, and Cairo stood on the brink of final liberation. The morning sun was now in ascent. It cast a golden hue over the city of Cairo. The once tumultuous battlefield lay quiet, the sound of war replaced by the gentle hum of human survival. The air was filled with the scent of smoke and the lingering echoes of battle, a stark reminder of the night's ferocity. Ares, battered and bloodied from the intense combat, felt his strength waning. His vision blurred as pain surged through his wounds, and the world around him began to fade into darkness. The last thing Ares saw before losing consciousness was the steadfast presence of his soldiers encircling him, their faces etched with concern and determination. Their unwavering support provided a fleeting sense of comfort amidst the chaos. Exhaustion quickly claimed him. Just like that, he succumbed to the void. When Ares awoke, the first rays of morning light filtered through the curtains of his childhood home, bathing the room in a soft, warm glow. Confusion clouded his mind as he struggled to rise, the memories of battle and loss still fresh in his mind. The familiar surroundings offered a stark contrast to the war-torn city he had fought to save. His mother Ursa entered the room, her face a mixture of relief and worry. She moved with a grace that belied the exhaustion etched into her features. Her presence was a beacon of comfort in the aftermath of chaos. "Thank goodness you are awake, Ares," she said softly, approaching him with open arms. Ares blinked. The weight of his injuries pressed heavily upon him. "Mother, am I home?" he asked. His voice trembled with a mix of relief and lingering fear. Ursa knelt beside him. Her hands gently brushed his hair back from his face. "You are. It has been 3 days. I was worried I'd lost you as well. It seems the Vitasanas has healed your wounds quite well." Tears welled in Ares' eyes as he struggled to process the feeling of his mother's unwavering support. "I'm sorry about father. I couldn't save him." His voice broke. The guilt and sorrow overwhelmed him. Ursa's expression softened, her eyes filled with understanding and love. "Did you do the best you could?" she asked. Her voice was steady, despite the emotion behind her words. Ares nodded slowly, swallowing hard against the lump in his throat. "I believe so." She reached out, taking his hand in hers and squeezing it gently. Then that's all that matters? Ares looked up, his eyes searching hers for reassurance. Are you going to be all right without him? Ursa smiled faintly, though the pain was evident in her eyes. In time, I will never be the person I was, but I will find room in my heart to cope with such sadness. Your father and I had many good years together. We forget how lucky we are to even have the time we are given with one another. Ares felt a surge of love and gratitude wash over him. The weight of his loss was momentarily lifted by his mother's comforting presence. Despite the sorrow that still lingered, he knew that together they could begin to heal and rebuild what had been torn apart. Do you think we will see them again? He asked his mother, his voice barely above a whisper. Ursa stared out at the bright blue sky through Ares' bedroom window. Her eyes reflected a depth of wisdom and sorrow. I don't think so, Ares. The universe is infinite. There are infinite places our lost loves could go to once we pass. I think we were fortunate to share any time at all with someone we truly love. I don't think we will ever see them again. They will be out there, somewhere, and for us we get to continue to live the lives we have been gifted, for however long that may be. And one day, when it's our time, we will leave this world as well, and drift off into the cosmic void also, continuing our own journey through the infinite. Ares broke down in tears. The weight of his odyssey so far never had felt so immense. His feelings spiraled back to the loss of his father and the countless hardships of his journey. You know you can spend as much time as you wish here to heal as you need, Ursa said softly, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Thank you, I will. Ares responded. His voice trembled, yet was filled with gratitude. The following weeks passed in a gentle blur for Ares, who stayed in his childhood home to recover from his wounds, both the visible ones and those that weighed heavily within his heart. His two younger sisters returned home, grieving together their loss. True to his mother's words, peace and healing came in slow measures. Daily swims in the calm waters his father once cherished, moments of conversation with his sisters, and quiet intervals studying Polaris' old writings kept Ares feeling alive. It was a time of rest and reflection in equal measure. One evening, after finishing a sunset swim, Ares climbed the familiar steps leading back to the home that carried so many echoes of his father. As he entered the modest study, the last rays of sunlight cast a soft glow on the simple wooden desk that once belonged to Polaris. His gaze fell on the artifact resting there. Its surface caught the fading light in a muted shimmer. For days, weeks really, he had left it untouched, unwilling or unready to return to its mystery. Yet now, something in his heart stirred. The losses he had endured, the counsel from the Brotherhood to journey to Eden, and the memory of his father's unwavering curiosity all converged in Ares' mind. A gentle resolve welled up within him. The knowledge he sought and the duty he bore could no longer wait. Crossing the room, he lifted the artifact from the desk. Its weight felt familiar, yet still carried an aura of the unknown. He recalled Nempty and Montu's words. Eden awaited him, an invitation to unravel the secrets encoded in this relic. The thought sent a quiet thrill through him. He glanced at the notes and sketches scattered around. Polaris' final reflections, half-finished paintings of coastal vistas and descriptions of the old energies. Each fragment of his father's mind urged him onward, hinting that seeking truth was in the family's very marrow. Deep in his heart, he knew the quiet days at home, though precious, had only been a respite. He was healed in body, if not yet in spirit, but the world was still troubled, shaped by events more immense than any single city's siege. The riddle of the artifact, the voices of Eden, and the fate of countless others still haunted the edges of his thoughts. This, he realized, was his calling, the path that would carry him forward. Stepping outside onto the veranda, Ares held the artifact close, letting the evening breeze brush past his face. Overhead, Stars emerged in the purpling sky. He remembered his father's reassurance that sometimes doing the best you could was all you could offer. This pursuit of knowledge was an enduring connection to Polaris. Cradling the artifact gently, Ares allowed himself one final moment of sorrow for all that had been lost. Friends, father, the innocence he once knew. Then he drew a breath and let the familiar spark of curiosity and sense of purpose mingle in his chest. The war-scarred city of Cairo might rest now under a reclaimed frequency, however many questions remained unanswered. Many roads still branched off into the unknown. Eden, with its archives and guidance, stood beckoning, an obligation, a quest, and an odyssey. Ares was ready. Slipping the artifact into a small leather pouch, he glanced over at Ursa, who watched from the doorway, her eyes kind and understanding. She nodded slightly, as if to grant him silent permission. Ares smiled a cautious, bittersweet smile, and then turned to gaze at the distant horizon. He would say his farewells properly in the morning, for now the sun had set, and the stars glimmered with unspoken possibilities. In that twilight, Ares knew his journey was far from done. Eden was calling,